The crimson-scaled Velthari diplomat's 4 eyes gleamed with what humans had learned to recognize as amusement. Across the negotiation chamber aboard the neutral station, Captain Lysander Corvex maintained his poker face while the alien's translator crackled to life. "Your species amuses us, Captain," hissed Velthari Prime Negotiator 6 Vanya through the device. "You claim your people can adapt to any environment, yet you struggle with our simple atmospheric processors on your frontier worlds." Corvex leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. The human delegation had come to discuss mining rights in the Kepler 442 system, but the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. Around the oval table, representatives from 6 different species watched with varying degrees of interest. The insectoid Chicktar clicked their mandibles nervously, while the crystalline lumina remained perfectly still, their faceted forms reflecting the chamber's blue lighting. "Our struggles resulted in successful colonies on 47 worlds in the past century," Corvex replied evenly, "including 3 that your own surveys classified as uninhabitable." 6 Vanya's tail lashed, a sign of irritation. "Child's play. Worlds with breathable atmospheres and tolerable gravity. But there are places in this galaxy that would kill your kind in moments." The Chicktar delegate, Zikmoth, chittered agreement. "The humans are determined, but there are limits to flesh and blood." That's when Corvex saw his opening. The Velthari had been stalling negotiations for weeks, clearly testing human resolve. Time to turn the tables. "Care to make a wager, Prime Negotiator?" The chamber fell silent. Even the normally chatty ethereal delegate, Wispnala, stopped their constant energy fluctuations. 6 Vanya's scales shifted from crimson to a deeper burgundy. Surprise. "What manner of wager?" "You choose a world your people consider uninhabitable to carbon-based life. Give us 1 standard year. If we establish a functioning colony, we get exclusive mining rights to the entire Kepler 442 system. If we fail..." Corvex paused dramatically. "We withdraw all territorial claims in this sector." The alien delegates exchanged glances, or the equivalent in their species' body language. The stakes were enormous. Kepler 442 contained rare minerals essential for faster-than-light travel. Control of that system would shift the balance of power in 3 sectors. 6 Vanya's translator remained silent for long moments as the Velthari conferred through subsonic communication. Finally, she spoke. "There is a world. We call it Kethmaran, the Devourer. Gravity 3 times your Earth standard, atmosphere of methane and hydrogen sulfide. Surface temperature fluctuates between -40 and +60 Celsius. Constant seismic activity. Radiation levels that would sterilize most organic compounds. Even we cannot survive there without environmental suits." The Lumina delegate, Christandra, chimed like broken glass. "The Velthari speak truth. We have surveyed Kethmaran. It devours ships that approach too closely. The electromagnetic storms alone..." "We'll take it," Corvex interrupted. Around the table, shocked silence. Even his own aide, Commander Nixtara Bellwether, shot him a warning look. But Corvex had done his homework. He'd studied the preliminary surveys, run the simulations. It would be hell, but humans had survived hell before. 6 Vanya's 4 eyes narrowed to slits. "You would risk your species' expansion for such a gamble?" "We're not risking it," Corvex smiled. "We're guaranteeing it. 1 year, Prime Negotiator, start the clock." 6 months later, the TSS Endurance hung in orbit around Kethmaran like a steel prayer against the void. Through the reinforced viewport of the command deck, Chief Engineer Kalen Dross watched lightning storms rage across the planet's surface, each bolt carrying enough energy to power a city. "Final systems check complete," reported Navigator Quintera Ashvale, her augmented reality display casting ghostly light across her features. "All teams report ready for deployment." Dross nodded grimly. The Endurance carried 1,200 volunteers, scientists, engineers, terraforming specialists, and soldiers. Each had been modified with the latest in human adaptive technology, enhanced cardiovascular systems for high gravity, reinforced skeletal structures, and respiratory upgrades that could filter the planet's toxic atmosphere in emergencies. Atmospheric entry in T-10 minutes, announced the ship's AI, Prometheus. Weather conditions, apocalyptic. Through the comm system, Dross heard nervous laughter from the deployment bays. Good. Fear would keep them sharp, but humor would keep them sane. Dr. Zaralyn Voss, the mission's chief xenobiologist, joined him at the viewport. Her cybernetic eye whirred as it analyzed the data streams. The indigenous microorganisms are more active than our probes indicated. They seem to thrive in the radiation zones. Dangerous? Unknown. But they're definitely interested in our probe materials. They've been sampling them. The first wave of landing pods launched as the Endurance entered the upper atmosphere. Each pod contained prefabricated habitat modules, power generators, and mining equipment designed to function in Kethmaran's hostile environment. The plan was simple in concept, nightmarish in execution. Establish a foothold, adapt, and expand. Pod 7's feed crackled with static as it descended through a particularly violent storm system. Dross watched the biometric readings of its passengers, 3 engineers and a geologist, as their bodies fought against the increasing gravitational stress. Pod 7, report status. Hull integrity holding, came the strained voice of engineer Vexandra Kane. But the gravitational differential is playing hell with our inner ears. Request permission to activate enhanced equilibrium protocols. Granted. All pods, activate full environmental countermeasures. On the screens, vital signs stabilized as the crew's biological modifications kicked in. Humanity had learned much from their expansion into hostile environments. The descendants of people who had survived Arctic wastelands and desert hellscapes carried those adaptations in their genes, enhanced now by careful bioengineering. The first pods touched down in a relatively stable valley between 2 volcanic ranges. Immediately, the automated systems began erecting the initial habitat domes. The transparent aluminum shells could withstand the pressure differential and filter the toxic atmosphere while the inhabitants worked to establish more permanent structures. First dome sealed and pressurized, reported Pod 7. Beginning soil analysis and geothermal tap installation, but Kethmaran wasn't finished testing them. A seismic tremor registered on the sensors, followed by another. Then the ground beneath Pod 12 cracked open, releasing a geyser of superheated, mineral-rich water that would have been lethal to unprotected humans. Pod 12, evacuate immediately. Negative. Command. We're not evacuating. The voice belonged to geologist Rindar Ashford, his tone steady despite the chaos. This is perfect. The thermal output is exactly what we need for the primary power station. We're adapting the site plan. Dross felt a familiar surge of pride. This was what humans did. They didn't just survive impossible odds, they turned them into advantages. Within hours, Pod 12 had converted the dangerous geyser into the colony's first geothermal power plant. As the sun set on Kethmaran, a bloated orange star that bathed everything in hellish light, the first human colony began to take shape on a world that was supposed to kill them all. 3 months into the colonization, Kethmaran had already claimed 14 lives, not from the hostile environment itself, but from the colonists' refusal to respect it. Dr. Voss stood in the medical bay, reviewing the autopsy data on her latest patient. A mining engineer who had removed his atmospheric filter to get a better look at some unusual crystal formations. Hydrogen sulfide poisoning, she reported to the morning briefing. Instantaneous cardiac arrest. The concentrations down in the deep mining shafts are higher than our models predicted. Colony Administrator Jexander Thorne, a weathered veteran of humanity's expansion campaigns, nodded gravely. His left arm, lost in a mining accident on Kepler 186f, had been replaced with a cybernetic limb perfectly adapted to Keth Moran's high-gravity environment. "New protocols," he announced. "No one goes into the deep mines without full environmental gear. No exceptions, no matter how quick the task seems." Around the table, department heads absorbed the information. Chief Botanist Astra Lynn Chorus shifted uncomfortably in her reinforced chair. The high gravity played hell with everyone's spine, but her modifications were working better than most. "Speaking of adaptations," she said, pulling up a holographic display, "I have good news. The greenhouse domes are showing remarkable progress. We've successfully cultivated 17 earth crop varieties in the local soil after treatment with our bacterial filters." The display showed rows of genetically modified wheat, potatoes, and soybeans thriving under the orange-tinted light of Keth Moran's sun. More importantly, some of the plants were beginning to show natural adaptations to the environment. Root systems growing deeper and more robust, leaves developing thicker, waxy coatings to protect against the corrosive atmosphere. "How long until we're food independent?" asked Thorne. 6 months for basic sustenance, 12 for full nutritional independence. The key breakthrough was reverse engineering the local microorganisms' radiation resistance. Dr. Voss's team has been invaluable. Voss nodded. The indigenous bacteria have developed incredible mechanisms for repairing cellular damage. We've begun incorporating similar systems into our crop modifications. The applications for human enhancement are promising. Chief of Security Dexalon Reeves, his massive frame a testament to both genetic enhancement and adaptive technology, leaned forward. "What about the native wildlife? We've had 3 incidents this week with those crystalline predators. The creatures in question were unlike anything in Earth's fossil record, silicon-based life forms that fed on electromagnetic energy and seemed to regard the human colony as a particularly interesting power source. They moved through Keth Moran's crust like dolphins through water, emerging without warning to investigate the colony's energy signatures. They're not actually hostile," Voss explained. "They're curious, incredibly intelligent too. We've established basic communication protocols using light patterns. They seem to understand that we're trying to coexist." "Coexist?" Reeves raised an eyebrow. "One of them nearly drained the power from Habitat 7 last week. And when we showed it the auxiliary power coupling specifically designed for such interactions, it used that instead. They're learning our boundaries just as we're learning theirs." Thorne stood, his cybernetic arm whirring softly as it adjusted to the gesture. Through the conference room's reinforced windows, the colony spread out below them. A growing network of domes, towers, and industrial facilities that would have been impossible on any other world. Here, the extreme conditions had forced innovations that would benefit human colonies throughout the galaxy. "Status report on the mining operations?" he asked. Chief Miner Colvin Hartwell grinned, his teeth gleaming white against his radiation-tanned skin. "Beyond our wildest projections, the rare Earth deposits are concentrated in ways we've never seen. The tectonic activity that makes this world so dangerous has also created geological formations that shouldn't exist. We're extracting materials that will revolutionize FTL drive technology." The meeting continued for another hour, but the underlying message was clear. Humanity wasn't just surviving on Keth Moran. They were thriving. The planet that was supposed to kill them was becoming a testament to human adaptability and ingenuity. Outside, the daily methane storm began to build on the horizon, its toxic clouds lit from within by electrical discharges. But inside the colony, children were being born, the first generation of true Keth Moran natives, their bodies already beginning to adapt to their harsh new world. The first child born on Keth Moran was a miracle wrapped in engineering. Little Nyxaria Solace emerged from her mother's womb with lungs that could process trace amounts of methane, bones dense enough to function in triple gravity, and eyes that could see deeper into the infrared spectrum than any baseline human. Dr. Voss carefully examined the infant in the colony's state-of-the-art medical facility, her instruments recording data that would reshape humanity's understanding of rapid adaptation. "Her cardiovascular system is remarkable," she murmured to the child's parents, engineers Torvin and Lisa Lynn Solis. "Her heart is 30% larger than Earth-normal newborns, and her blood carries oxygen at unprecedented efficiency." "Is she healthy?" Lisa Lynn asked, her voice tight with the concern of any new parent. "She's not just healthy, she's perfectly adapted to this world. Her genetic expression has activated dormant sequences that we've only seen in theoretical models. This is human evolution in real time. 9 months had passed since the first landing, and the colony had grown from 1,200 desperate souls to nearly 2,000 thriving pioneers. The population boom wasn't just from new arrivals. Kethmaran's harsh environment had triggered something primal in human biology. Fertility rates had skyrocketed, and pregnancy complications had virtually disappeared. Administrator Thorne stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed central spire, watching the latest batch of mining mechs descend into the planet's crust. These weren't the standard Earth-designed units they'd started with. Those had lasted 3 weeks before the environment destroyed them. These were hybrid machines incorporating technology reverse-engineered from the crystalline natives and built with materials that existed nowhere else in the known galaxy. "Daily production reports," announced Chief Hartwell over the comm system. "We've exceeded our yearly quotas by 400%. The Velthari are going to be very unhappy." Through the reinforced windows, Thorne could see the colony's newest addition, a massive atmospheric processor that didn't fight Kethmaran's toxic air, but instead harnessed it. The methane and hydrogen sulfide that should have killed them now powered their industrial operations. Waste products from human habitation were being processed by modified bacteria into building materials stronger than anything produced on Earth. "Sir," came a voice from behind him. Communications Officer Zara Beth Wynn held a data pad, her expression unreadable. "We've received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to inspect our progress." Thorne turned, his cybernetic arm automatically adjusting to the movement. "How long until they arrive?" 2 weeks. The message was sent from the neutral station where you made the original wager. Prime Negotiator Sixavanya is leading the inspection team personally. A slow smile spread across Thorne's weathered features. "Perfect timing. Send a reply. Tell them they're welcome to visit. Make sure to mention that we'll be happy to give them the full tour of our thriving colony." Down in the research laboratories, Dr. Voss was making discoveries that would have been impossible anywhere else in the galaxy. The native microorganisms weren't just radiation resistant. They were actively converting background radiation into usable energy. Her team had successfully integrated similar mechanisms into human intestinal bacteria, creating a population that could literally derive nutrition from Kethmaran's hostile environment. "The implications are staggering," she reported to the evening briefing. "We're not just adapting to this world, we're becoming something new. The children born here will be as different from baseline humans as we are from our pre-space flight ancestors." Chief Botanist Chorus had similar news from the agricultural sector. "The modified crops aren't just surviving, they're evolving. Each generation is more efficient, more resilient. We've created a sustainable ecosystem that's entirely unique to this world." But perhaps the most remarkable development was in the relationship between the colonists and Kethmaran's native crystalline species. What had started as cautious coexistence had evolved into something approaching symbiosis. The crystal beings provided geological insights that had revolutionized mining operations, while human technology offered them new ways to interact with electromagnetic fields. Young Nyxaria Solace, now taking her first steps on legs that would never know Earth's gentle gravity, represented the future of humanity, a species that didn't just survive in impossible environments, but transformed them into homes. As Kethmaran's 3 moons rose over the colony, casting everything in an otherworldly light, Administrator Thorne prepared for the arrival of beings who had bet against human determination. They were about to learn what happened when you underestimated a species that had crawled out of primordial oceans and decided to claim the stars. The Velthari diplomatic vessel Sovereignty approached Kethmaran with all the caution of a predator entering unfamiliar territory. On the bridge, Prime Negotiator. Zixavanya studied the sensor readings with growing disbelief. Where her instruments should have detected a struggling outpost clinging to survival, they showed a thriving industrial complex with energy signatures that rivaled established core worlds. "Verify those readings," she hissed to her sensor operator. "Verified. Prime Negotiator. The human colony is extensive. I'm detecting atmospheric processors, manufacturing facilities, and what appears to be a starship construction yard." Vanya's scales shifted from their normal crimson to a disturbed purple. "That's impossible. The radiation alone should have killed them within days." Beside her, Chictar Delegate Zikmoth clicked his mandibles nervously. "Perhaps the humans found a way to shield themselves? Buried underground habitats?" "No," came the crystalline voice of Lumina Representative Christandra. "The energy patterns suggest surface installations, extensive ones." As they entered Kethmaran's upper atmosphere, the full scope of human achievement became apparent. The planet's toxic storms had been channeled into a network of atmospheric processors that painted the sky in geometric patterns. What should have been a wasteland of poisonous gases and radiation now resembled a carefully orchestrated symphony of industry and habitation. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human figure that made Vanya's 4 eyes widen in shock. Administrator Thorne appeared completely unmodified, no environmental suit, no visible breathing apparatus. Behind him, she could see other humans moving about their business, with casual disregard for what should have been a lethally hostile environment. "Prime Negotiator Vanya, welcome to New Kethmaran Colony," Thorne said, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone standing in their own living room. "We're honored by your visit. I trust you brought environmental suits? Our atmospheric processors have made the air breathable for us, but your species might find it challenging." The insult was delivered with such perfect diplomatic courtesy that it took Vanya several seconds to process it. The humans weren't just surviving on Kethmaran, they were comfortable there. We will inspect your facilities," she managed. "Of course. Fair warning, though. Some of our industrial areas are experiencing what we call enhanced atmospheric conditions. The methane concentrations in those zones are approaching 15%. Perfect for our new manufacturing processes, but potentially hazardous for visitors." The inspection tour was a revelation that challenged everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about human limitations. Vanya and her team, sealed within their environmental suits, watched human children play in areas where their own species would die in minutes. They observed mining operations that had turned Kethmaran's geological violence into an asset, and manufacturing facilities that produced materials using processes that shouldn't have been possible. Dr. Voss led them through the medical center, where the latest generation of Kethmaran-born humans displayed adaptations that bordered on speciation. Enhanced cardiovascular efficiency, improved radiation resistance, and modified respiratory systems, she explained cheerfully. "The children born here are the first true natives of this world." "This is not adaptation," Vanya whispered to her companions. "This is evolution, rapid, directed evolution." But the most shocking revelation came in the colony's newest sector, the xenobiology laboratories where humans worked alongside Kethmaran's crystalline natives. The silicon-based entities moved through their hybrid environment with ease, their electromagnetic signatures interfacing seamlessly with human technology. Symbiosis, explained Chief Researcher Axton Darvale, a young man whose eyes held flecks of crystalline material that seemed to glow with inner light. They help us understand the planet's geological systems, and we provide them with new forms of electromagnetic stimulation. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, Zickmoth chittered in distress. You're changing. This isn't the same species we negotiated with. Evolution is what we do, Thorne replied. Every world humanity has settled has changed us, and we've changed it in return. Kethmaran is just more dramatic than most. The final stop on the tour was the orbital shipyard, where the framework of humanity's first deep space vessel designed specifically for extreme environments took shape. Built from materials that existed nowhere else in the galaxy and powered by fusion reactors that used Kethmaran's atmospheric gases as fuel, it represented technology that would revolutionize space exploration. Specifications? Asked Christandra, her crystalline form reflecting the shipyard's lights. Classified, Thorne smiled. But I can tell you it's designed to operate in environments that would destroy conventional spacecraft. Think of it as humanity's gift to the galaxy. Proof that there's no such thing as an uninhabitable world. Only worlds that haven't met the right species yet. As the inspection team prepared to depart, Sixvanya found herself staring at the colonies, Central Plaza, where human families gathered for an evening festival. Children who had never known Earth's gentle embrace played games in triple gravity, their laughter carrying through air that would have been poison to their grandparents. The wager, she said quietly. 1 year to establish a functioning colony. We established it in 6 months, Thorne replied. The past 6 months have been about optimization. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the great amphitheater of Nexus Station, its crystalline walls reflecting the agitated bioluminescence of dozens of species. For the first time in over a century, every major civilization had sent their highest-ranking representatives. The topic: humanity's impossible success on Kethmaran. Prime Negotiator Sixvanya stood at the central podium, her scales a mottled pattern of colors that spoke to her deep distress. Honored delegates, what we witnessed on Kethmaran represents a fundamental threat to the established order of galactic civilization. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The ethereal delegate, Wispanala, pulsed with agitated energy. Threat? The humans have fulfilled their wager. Surely honor demands honor. Sixvanya's voice carried across the chamber. They have not merely survived. They have thrived. They have created something that should not exist, and they are no longer entirely human. The chamber fell silent. Through the great viewing ports, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the political crisis unfolding below. Chiktar Ambassador Zickmoth clicked forward, his insectoid form gleaming under the chamber's lights. The Prime Negotiator speaks. Truth. We have reviewed the inspection data. The humans on Kethmaran show genetic drift consistent with accelerated evolution. In less than 1 year, they have begun to speciate. Speciation is natural, interjected the Lumina delegate, Christandra. All species adapt to new environments. Not like this, Sixvanya hissed. They are not adapting to survive. They are adapting to dominate. Their colony ships are already surveying worlds we have classified as impossible for carbon-based life. They are expanding into environments that were our last refuge from organic contamination. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. For millennia, the galactic balance had been maintained by the understanding that certain worlds were simply uninhabitable to certain types of life. The silicon-based Lumina had their crystal worlds, the energy-based ethereals their plasma storms, and carbon-based species like the Velthari, their carefully controlled environments. Humanity was erasing those boundaries. From the human delegation, a new voice spoke. Not Administrator Thorne, who had remained on Kethmaran, but Ambassador. Kirillin Vextor, her modified physiology a testament to humanity's new adaptability. Her bones showed the density of a Kethmaran native. Her eyes held the crystalline flecks that marked symbiosis with the planet's native life forms. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying a harmonic resonance that hadn't existed in baseline human speech. "The Velthari speak of threats and contamination, but consider this. Every world we have contaminated has become more diverse, more productive, more alive than it was before our arrival." She gestured, and holographic. Displays showed the transformation of Kethmaran over the past year. Barren wastelands had become thriving ecosystems where Earth life, native crystalline entities, and hybrid organisms coexisted in unprecedented harmony. "We do not conquer worlds," Vextor continued. "We join them. We become part of them, and they become part of us. This is not contamination. This is evolution on a galactic scale." The ethereal delegate pulsed with what might have been curiosity. "Your species changes rapidly. This troubles some. What will you become?" "Whatever we need to become," Vextor replied. "That is what makes us human." Sixvanya slammed her clawed hand against the podium. "This is precisely the threat. They acknowledge no limits, recognize no boundaries. They will not be contained by a environment, gravity, atmosphere, or radiation. What happens when there are no more uninhabitable worlds to exile them to?" The question struck to the heart of galactic politics. For thousands of years, species had maintained their territories through natural boundaries. The Velthari could not survive in crystalline environments. The Lumina could not exist in organic atmospheres. The Chiktar required specific atmospheric pressures. These limitations had created a natural balance. Humanity was breaking that balance. Perhaps came a new voice. It is time for a new kind of balance. The speaker was unprecedented. A hybrid being that had never before appeared in the council chambers. Part human, part crystalline, part energy. It represented something that shouldn't have been possible according to every known law of biology and physics. "I am Nixaria Solace," the being said, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated with every species present. "Firstborn of Kethmaran, child of three worlds, speaker for the next phase of galactic evolution." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates demanded explanations, others called for immediate military intervention, and a few simply stared in wonder at what they were witnessing. "The age of separation is ending," Nixaria continued, somehow making her voice heard above the tumult. "Humanity offers not conquest, but synthesis. We do not seek to replace you, we seek to become you and invite you to become us." The implications were staggering. Not just human expansion, but the possibility of a truly unified galactic civilization where the barriers between species dissolved into something greater than the sum of its parts. Sixvanya stared at the hybrid being, her scales shifting through colors that had no names. The wager had been about one world, one impossible colony, but humanity had used it to announce something far more significant, the next stage of galactic evolution, and they were inviting everyone to join them. 5 years after the wager, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The TSS Kethmaran's Pride, humanity's first extreme environment starship, hung in orbit around a world that defied classification. The planet designated XK739 existed in a triple star system where radiation levels should have sterilized any form of life. Yet its surface teemed with hybrid ecosystems that blended technologies and biologies from a dozen different species. Ambassador Kirillin Vextor, now bearing the crystalline neural interfaces that marked her as a true child of three worlds, stood in the ship's observation deck alongside beings who represented the new face of galactic civilization. Beside her, former prime negotiator Sixvanya, now Integration specialist HFY displayed scales that shifted through spectrums impossible for her original biology. The Lumina Collective reports successful integration of organic processing nodes in the Kepler 442 system, HFY reported, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked successful cross-species synthesis. Carbon-silicon hybrid structures are proving more resilient than either pure form. Through the viewport, they watched as construction mechs, themselves hybrid entities that blended human engineering with Chictar precision and ethereal energy manipulation, assembled the framework of the galaxy's first truly integrated colony. Species that had spent millennia separated by biological incompatibility now work together to create something unprecedented. Integration completion stands at 73%, added Zikmoth, his modified Chictar physiology now capable of processing a dozen different atmospheric compositions. The ethereal energy beings have successfully stabilized in crystalline organic hybrid hosts. On the planet below, children played in environment suits that filtered and processed atmospheric compositions that would have been impossible for any single species to survive. These weren't the desperate survival measures of humanity's early expansion, but the natural equipment of beings who belong to the galaxy itself rather than any single world. Nyx Area Solace, now grown to young adulthood and serving as Director of Galactic Integration, manifested beside them, her consciousness existing simultaneously in biological, crystalline, and energy states. The Velthari Homeworld has voted to begin atmospheric modification. They want to introduce Earth-style weather patterns and lumina, crystal formations to create the first tri-environmental world. The transformation hadn't been without its challenges. 3 species had chosen complete isolation rather than integration, retreating to remote sectors where they maintained their original forms. A few frontier worlds had experienced integration failures, resulting in temporary ecological disruptions. But for every setback, there were a dozen successes that defied previous understanding of what was possible. Status of the deep space surveys? Vextor asked. Remarkable, HFY replied, her modified sensory organs processing data streams that no single species could have interpreted. We've identified 17 worlds previously classified as completely uninhabitable that show potential for integrated colonies. The Andromeda expedition reports that 3 of their target systems contain phenomena that could support entirely new forms of hybrid life. The Andromeda expedition, the first truly intergalactic venture, crewed by beings who represented every major species in synthesis, had launched 2 years earlier. Their mission: to establish contact with civilizations beyond the Milky Way and offer them the gift of integration. Incoming transmission from Kethmaran Central, announced the ship's AI, its consciousness now a blend of human creativity, lumina, logic, and ethereal intuition. The holographic display showed Administrator Thorne, though he was barely recognizable as the human who had first accepted the Velthari wager. His biology had adapted to serve as a permanent interface between human, Velthari, and crystalline systems. His consciousness existed in a state that defied traditional definitions of individual identity. The Council of Synthesis has reached a unanimous decision, he announced. The galaxy is ready for the next phase. The next phase, the great project that had grown out of humanity's impossible success on Kethmaran. Not just the integration of species within the Milky Way, but the preparation for contact with other galaxies, other forms of consciousness that might exist beyond current understanding. Begin the Beacon Project, Vextor ordered. Across the galaxy, hybrid civilizations that had been building toward this moment for 5 years suddenly coordinated their efforts. Energy beings provided power on scales that could influence stellar formation. Crystalline species contributed processing power that could model the behavior of entire galactic clusters. Organic species provided the creativity and adaptability that made impossible solutions possible. The beacon, A combination of technology, biology, and pure thought began to take shape. Not just a device for communication across intergalactic distances, but a demonstration of what synthesis could achieve. A message to the universe that the galaxy had evolved beyond the limitations of individual species. As the first harmonics of the beacon reached across the void toward distant galaxies, Nyxaria Solace smiled with an expression that belonged to no single species. The Velthari had wagered that humans couldn't survive their homeworld. Instead, humanity had used that impossible world as the foundation for something greater than survival. They had built synthesis. They had created unity. They had proven that there were no limits to what could be achieved when the barriers between species dissolved into cooperation. The galaxy had become human not through conquest, but through integration. And in becoming human, humanity had become something far greater than they had ever been alone. In the depths of space, the beacon sang its song of unity to civilizations yet unknown, carrying with it the lesson learned on an impossible world. That the greatest strength lay not in individual survival, but in the courage to become something new together. The age of separation was over. The age of synthesis had begun, and in a small medical facility on Kethmaran, the 1,000th child born on that impossible world took her first breath. Her biology a perfect fusion of human creativity, Velthari resilience, and crystalline precision. She was the future made manifest, proof that from the ashes of impossible odds, life would always find a way to not just survive, but thrive.